And welcome to the Discover History YouTube channel, and today I'm going to be talking about Easter. Hopefully you're having a good Easter and you're probably eating lots of chocolate Easter eggs. However, the interesting thing about Easter eggs is really the first proper Easter eggs, actually chocolate Easter eggs, come along around about 1840, but the hollow ones, like this one I've been hiding from everyone else in the house, a hollow Easter egg, is really dated from about the 1870s, really. So I'm just going to put that down somewhere safe. So where does Easter come from? Well, Easter is definitely a Christian celebration, just like Christmas is. However, most of these traditions actually have pagan ancestry. For example, Christmas, we could probably say, comes from winter solstice, maybe, which is the 21st of December. It could also come from things like the festival of Yule, or maybe even the Roman Saturnalia festival. And Easter, if you look back in history, probably stems from a spring celebration that our pagan ancestors were involved with. The most common name for the pagan version of Easter is Eostre, which in a way is where we get the word Easter from. And it was a celebration of spring. Now, in the modern day, we don't really notice the seasons so much, but if you go back into the past, we were more in tune with nature. And around about March and April, we would have found that the blossom came out on the trees, the days started to drag out a little longer, the sun got warmer and warmer. And one of the things I notice every year is how the shadows change. We go from a very long shadow, which is from really a winter sun, to a very short shadow as the sun gets higher in the sky. And people would have seen lots of new things come into life, lots of green buds appearing on plants and trees, and also things like hares boxing away, lambs being born, and so on. So people would have celebrated the fact that they got through the winter. We don't really have that problem today. We have central heating, but if you go back in history, people could have starved, they could have froze, they could have got all sorts of ailments and illnesses from living through a winter or trying to live through winter. So in the past, our ancestors wanted a spring festival. So Eostre is probably the first one. Um, Pagan people often celebrated things like the hare. And here we have a little illustration of a hare. And most people now think this is why we associate Easter with an Easter bunny. So the question is, should we be celebrating by thinking of the Easter bunny? Or in theory, should we be thinking it as the Easter hare? Because technically, that is what we had in this country before rabbits come along even. Now, when we get to the medieval period, and just like Christmas, it becomes a Christian thing, Easter becomes a very important date on the Christian calendar. And medieval people still associated it with new life. And therefore, it was quite common in the medieval era to actually get a gift of an egg, a boiled egg, or maybe even a fresh egg. So people did hand out eggs to people, not the chocolate variety that we know today. Some eggs were actually decorated. Some eggs were painted up. Some eggs were actually dyed, and there's two ways of dyeing an egg. If you wanted a red egg, for example, you would take a pot, pop your fresh eggs into the pot with some water, and then add some beetroot. And it's the beetroot juice that turns the eggshell a red or a deep sort of pinky purple colour. If you wanted an egg to be bright yellow, you would chop up onion skins, pop it into a pot, boil it away, and you will be able to take out boiled eggs that are bright yellow. And people handed these out as colourful gifts at Easter time. And you have to remember, Easter, springtime, everything is getting brighter. Like I said, the shadows are getting shorter as the sun rises in the sky and warms after a cold winter. But as time went on, people like the monarch jumped on this idea, and he would often give eggs that were covered in gold leaf, for example, a very, very special egg that was given out to people. In the medieval period, it was quite common to also get a spiced loaf, and that's really the birth of what we now know is the hot cross bun that is often given out at Easter time. And there is a famous Victorian song that was often sang by the hot cross bun seller, which I'm sure you all remember. 1 a penny, 2 a penny, hot cross bun. I'm sure many people now are probably singing that and reciting it in their head. But when you get to the 18th and 19th century, when spices are more common in Britain, we do have spicier true hot cross buns, and also there's the Simnel cake. And the Simnel cake has been around for a very long time. However, Simnel cakes become very common by the 18th century. Here we have a illustration from that period showing a Simnel cake. I have seen quite a few photographs recently of Simnel cake, some very good Simnel cake pictures on Facebook and Twitter, mainly from friends of mine, and I know for a fact one of the best Simnel cakes going is the Simnel cakes that are made at St John's Church. Do, when the lockdown finish, come and see one of our monthly talks at St John's Church, and they may even have a Simnel cake for you to try. Absolutely fantastic, I am told. But by the Victorian era, you get a lot of commercialisation. We see it with Christmas, we see it with Valentine's Day, you see it also with Easter. And what that actually meant is cards started to appear, Easter cards. I've got 2 Easter cards here from the Victorian and Edwardian eras, and they often show spring scenes. So you get ones with daffodils, lambs and little chickens on, things like that. However, I will say, if you get a chance whilst you're having a look on the internet, have a look at some creepy Victorian Easter cards. There are some very strange ones out there, including, for example, hares jousting on the back of cockerels, for example. There are some really strange ones out there. But it was also the time when people often got given an egg, once again representing new life. These were sometimes made of wood. The finest quality ones were obviously the ones associated with Fabergé, and these are very expensive jewel encrusted eggs, and they were gifts, very much a Victorian idea that comes from Russia, in fact, and it came over here with Queen Victoria due to her background and the family relatives from all across in Europe. But the ultimate in the Victorian era was to get either a tin or paper mache egg, like this one here. And these were bought in sweet shops, in confectioners, and when you open these tin eggs or paper mache ones, like I said, it would have a number of fine chocolates in, usually in the shape of an egg as well. And this is where people in the Victorian era often associate the egg, especially a hollow egg, with being something like the empty tomb that they noticed when Christ's body was removed from it. So we have a lot of associations. Christianity has really taken over Easter as we know it today. But like I said, it goes back quite a long way in history. As well as having those eggs, by the 1840s you could also get a chocolate egg. These were very small, probably something more like a Cadbury's cream egg today, and they were solid chocolate. But then by the 1870s, as I said earlier, we do get the hollow chocolate egg. Chocolate eggs were probably only about this size. They were usually wrapped in tissue paper with bows and ribbons on them. And if you look at a modern one, this one's a gold one, very much like the golden eggs, the gold leafed eggs that they had in medieval times, but obviously much smaller, being a fresh egg. There were many games the Victorians liked to play at Easter time. One of the most popular ones was the egg and spoon race, which I'm sure some of you may have had a go with relatively recently. It's a very traditional Easter thing to do. Get a spoon, pop an egg on it, and see how fast you can go running around your gardens. There was also the egg tiptoe race, which was a Victorian strange idea whereby you place real eggs, it is said, across the floor in the parlour, and then you blindfold someone and they have to manoeuvre around the parlour without standing on a real egg. There was also egg rolling competitions, Easters in days gone by, where you take an Easter egg, place it at the top of a hill and then roll it down. Remember, you should be staying in, so don't do that if you haven't got a little hill or incline in your garden. And the interesting thing about that is people often say it's associated with rolling the stone away from the tomb that Jesus was in. We also have another interesting game, which is the Easter egg hunt, which I'm sure many of you have taken part in over Sunday, for example. And that's where you hide the eggs around the house or out in the garden and you let your children find them. These are all the traditions that we know of and actually really stem from the Victorian and Edwardian era. The only problem is Easter had problems, especially when we get to the First and Second World Wars. Because we were importing vast quantities of stuff in both those wars or before those wars, when you get to the First and Second World War, we get a lot of U-boat attacks on shipping, which actually meant there were shortages of the raw materials to go into making chocolate, and in particular chocolate Easter eggs. But people coped in both World War I and World War II. They often went back to painting eggs and giving them as gifts. In the Great War, in fact, there was a huge campaign where children were encouraged to find eggs, paint on them, often with the words, "To a brave soldier," and these eggs went to the front so soldiers could have nourishment from a fresh egg or a boiled egg. In the Second World War, there was even posters going around, especially by companies like Cadbury's, apologising with the fact that chocolate bars went from this big down to this big, and the fact that the ingredients had changed because of wartime restrictions. And Easter, even into the 1950s, was a period of shortages, for example. It wasn't until the 1960s, 70s, 80s, into my childhood now, where the Easter egg, the hollow Easter egg, became the thing to have. Nowadays, you can't just get an Easter egg, you can even get a chocolate Easter bunny. And the weird thing is about that is surely that should be maybe a chocolate hare if you go back to the festival of Eostre. Anyway, we like to be topical, so hopefully you've enjoyed our little video on the traditions of Easter. We do actually do talks that are based on things such as the history of Easter, the history of Christmas and so on. So if you are part of a talk group, have a look on our website at www.discoverhistory.co.uk and you will be able to find on there a list of our talks. Remember, when you put in Discover History, put a little dash, a hyphen between discover and history. So it's www.discover-history.co.uk. Stay safe, stay in, remember, and enjoy your chocolate eggs. See you soon. Bye bye.